And we do take you live now to the Utah Valley Convention Center for remarks by U.S. Senate candidate Mitt Romney. One of the speakers preceding him, Congressman John Curtis. The nuclear.
Thank you. But I will tell you, I have the honor to be here instead of with my wife with 4 awesome interns. A shout out to Derek, Ruben, Parker, and Joe, who are with me tonight, and future leaders in the Republican Party. Thank you for being here with me tonight. Well, when I was mayor, I used to rationalize that I wasn't a politician. That's getting a little bit harder to do, which concerns me, because I once heard that when God created the earth, He promised to put good and honest politicians in every corner of the earth, and then He made it round. Yeah, it's catching up with you, isn't it? So I've been in Congress 12 weeks. Can you imagine 12 weeks packed with more? We've had 3 votes on shutdowns, 2 shutdowns, Bears Ears, memos, immigration and tax reform, and I'm counting about 1 major issue per week for every week that I've been there. It's been amazing. But I will say this, Congress worked on tax reform for 31 years. And I had been there 3 days when we passed it. That's right. That's right. You're welcome. I have 3 bills in. I've done 7 town hall meetings in the last 2 weeks. My office has received 20,000 emails in the last few weeks. And I'm really enjoying it. I want you to know I am. People ask me, what's the biggest surprise to me when I go back there? And I'd like to share it with you because I believe it's full of hope. And sometimes we get pretty discouraged about Washington, but I'd like to leave you just a little message of hope. The biggest thing that I've observed is that there are a lot of good people back there. I hardly meet a colleague without walking away and saying, wow, that's a really good person, I'm impressed. Now you could ask yourself, well, how is it that all these good people are so dysfunctional? And I will simply remind any of you that are part of an HOA, you get it, right? You love your neighbor, and then you come together and function as an HOA like idiots, right? And so I want you to know there are a lot of good people, and maybe just kind of a behind-the-curtain story. It's not a big deal. As a matter of fact, it's a really small deal, but I think it gives you a sample of what I mean by the really good people. I had a rare opportunity. I was invited by Speaker Ryan to a dinner, and Governor, you will appreciate this, the type of person that he is. And it was in a restaurant, but it was in a room that was by ourselves, and there were about a dozen of us. And we sat down to eat, and he said, well, let's say a blessing on the meal. Who would like to say it? And I thought, hey, I'm the kid from Utah. I know how to say a blessing. And before I could raise my hand, somebody jumped in and said, I'll say it. And they all bowed their heads, and then they said a Catholic prayer, and about 8 of the 12 knew every word to this and said the prayer together. And I share that with you because I'm in the midst of God-fearing people. I've said more prayers in public with the Republican caucus the last 12 weeks than I think I have said in combined a lifetime here in Provo. They're good people, and I just share that with you because I want you to know that there is hope and that we can do good things. I want you to know, too, it is an honor, an unbelievable honor to serve as your representative in the 3rd District. Thank you for your trust and for your confidence, and I hope all of you will come see me soon. Thank you.
In preparing for our next speaker, I want to mention to each of you that a few months ago, as we do every year, we began to think about Lincoln Day dinner and what we're going to do and who we're going to bring and what would attract a good group of people to come. Because raising money isn't just about the money, it's about the attraction and how we can bring people. And we ran a lot of names across to everybody, and we sent out some requests, we sent out some information, and we came and the name of the speaker that's going to come to and speak to you in just a few minutes actually came across our thoughts and ideas in the midst of all these discussions. And it was actually about a month ago that that we found that everything got turned down that we'd like, but we go big. And we try to get great and awesome people that might be those that you would want to listen to. And we put in a tickler, and we thought, well, let's try. And we put in a tickler to try to get the former Republican national presidential nominee from the party to come speak to us. And that took a few weeks. It was only just 2 to 3 weeks ago that we actually had an answer. And we thought that was fantastic. And then we went spinning quickly to try to organize and finalize what we were going to do this evening. And so we want you to know that we're grateful for our speaker tonight to come and speak to us about his experiences as a presidential candidate for the United States and to share with us. I want to just share with you one story. I never met Mitt Romney until tonight, formally. I met him, though, about a year and a half ago on July 4th at Liberty Days in Liberty, Utah. If anybody knows where Eden and Liberty is, it's the Garden of Eden of Utah. A beautiful valley. And my daughter lives there, and we all gathered for the weekend for the holidays. And I found myself at a rodeo with a bunch of little kids, mutton busting. And I don't know how many of you know what that is, but I learned what that was. And so I enjoyed watching that. And we were sitting on the bleachers, and something came over the microphone that says that we had the privilege of having former Governor Mitt Romney with us today, but he's here as a grandpa and as dad, and we'd like to have you respect that and let him just enjoy that. And so I never said a word to him, but I sat about 7 feet from him for about 2 hours. And I was kind of curious. I'm a guy that loves to watch people, in case you want to know. And I do watch people, and I learn a lot. And the thing that was interesting to me, as we watched 50 kids out there chasing chickens and pigs and what was the third thing? Oh, and do the mutton busting. They were running after a pig, and there was about 50 kids out there just chasing this little pig. And over the shoulder, I keep hearing this voice saying, "Run, pig, run." And so looking after the little guy, I was impressed that besides rooting for his grandchildren, he was rooting for the pig. So for a person who doesn't really need an introduction, I'd like to introduce to you our keynote speaker tonight, Mitt Romney.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Thank you so much. That could be the most unusual introduction I've ever had, I'll tell you. Thank you, Rob. A special shout out to Rob and his team for organizing this event and for chairing the party. Rob Anderson is also here, chairman of the state party, the members of the party organization that work so hard to keep our party strong and vibrant. A special shout out to you and your entire teams. Thank you so much. It is an emotional time for me to come back and be in this city. Ann and I lived here for 3 years while we were going to school. This is where our oldest son was born, at Utah Valley Hospital. I remember very, very well the feelings that we had, and as we drove into town, looked to see how much is the same and how much is different. My goodness, New Skin didn't used to be here. You guys sitting in the front row here, they're obviously generous contributors tonight, and appreciate them and so many others who made this a financial success for the party. Now, I want to begin tonight by expressing some sorrow, and that's with regards to Ann and my profound feelings with regards to the tragedy at the school in Florida. What happened is unthinkable and unimaginable. Our hearts ache for the parents of the victims. Children aren't only our future, children are also our purpose. We invest our energies in them, our hopes, our prayers. We treasure every memory we have of them. Their successes are more thrilling to us than our own, and their disappointments hurt us more than they hurt them. To lose a child to senseless, debased evil is beyond our ability to comprehend. We think also of the lives of those heroes, those teachers who put their own bodies in front of their children, their school children. Not their own children, their class, their students, to save their lives. Extraordinary. And so, at a time like this, we do what little we can do. We send our love to those that are grieving. We hope that our prayers may somehow comfort them and dull the inextinguishable ache in their hearts. And as a legacy to those who've been killed and lost, we also must take action to prevent tragedies like this from happening again, and heaven forbid from happening in our great state. Now, I got a question. I went out on the internet today, our team did, and said if any of you who are here tonight had some questions for me to send them in. So I've selected some to respond to, but one related to how we prevent these school violent events from happening. And I believe, by the way, that this is a time for us to have this discussion because it's very much in our minds. I don't know what the answers are to make our schools safer. I don't have all the answers. I've got some ideas. But I think we can't just sit and wait and hope and expect that things are going to get better, because these things just keep on happening. Now, I've looked at some federal legislation. I haven't seen any federal legislation that would have prevented these attacks. And so I don't support passing some new federal law of the nature that I described. Although an exception may be, by the way, for Senator Orrin Hatch's proposal that he's been promoting, which is enhanced background checks. My own view, having served as a governor, is that the best place for finding solutions for school violence is going to be at the state and local level, where things are able to happen on a more advanced, responsive manner. States could consider the widest array of ideas, such as school building security measures, police patrols, volunteers perhaps in schools as patrols, intervention teams that would go into a school when there's a child that has a particularly disturbing nature, perhaps the age and psychological restrictions on gun purchases, but all these things could be considered by state legislatures. And I also think that states are able to find common ground between all the different voices by having people come in and share ideas. We were able to do that when I was serving as a governor. Because I'm convinced, by the way, that what's best for Cedar City is not what's best for New York City, and that there are differences between states and communities, and states, I think, are the best place to take action. Because waiting and hoping hasn't worked. I think it's time to solicit new ideas and debate them and take action. And I believe it is wrong and unacceptable for children in our schools to fear for their lives. Now, I'm going to take some questions here, which may break up the monotony of my 3.5-hour speech, but I'll move quickly. The first one came, why did you decide to settle in Utah? Because after all, we lived across the country for many years. Part of the answer is, of course, 9 grandkids here. Part is we had some marvelous experiences here, one as a student, but then with the Olympics. We came to know the heart of the people of Utah as we went out and asked for volunteers, and as you have probably heard, they overwhelmed us with how many were willing to sign up and give us 17 straight days with no pay and no tickets. But also just individual stories. A guy named Gardner, last name of Gardner, was taking care of driving the Armenian Paralympic athletes to and from their events. And their equipment was so old and so bad that he was concerned, and he got a group of people in town to raise some money and buy them new skis and new clothing for the outdoors, so they could be able to participate more effectively. It was just an inspiring moment. And so the heart of the people of Utah has always been something we've loved and appreciated. And so after my political life was over, we decided to make this our permanent home. And now look at me. What have I thought? I'm back in it again. All right, next question. Oh, and by the way, I do want to dispel the rumor that I only ran for president as a stepping stone to become a United States Senator from Utah. Now, let's see. How does a Republican get elected in Massachusetts? Bribery was not involved. Even Democrats want low taxes. Even Democrats want effective government. They keep on sending from Massachusetts liberals to Washington, but when it comes to their own homes and their own livelihoods, they tend to want Republicans. Of the 6 governors elected in Massachusetts, or have served in Massachusetts since Michael Dukakis was governor, of the 6 governors, 5 have been Republicans. And these Republican governors, I think, have done a pretty darn good job. Okay, how did you get anything done in a state full of Democrats? My legislature was almost 90% Democrat. And believe it or not, that turned out to be a bit of a blessing in disguise, because it taught me that I would have to learn how to work with people across the aisle to get anything done. You who are in legislatures know that, you know, a veto can be overridden with a 2/3 vote. Well, if the Democrats have 90% of the votes, my veto wasn't worth anything. And so I learned from the beginning, I said to my team, don't say anything critical of the Senate President or the Speaker of the House. And we didn't for months. And after about 6 months, I got a note from one of the 2 of them, and it said this: I've noticed you've never criticized me since you've been in office. I'm going to stop criticizing you. We got together. We got together, and every Monday we'd meet for 1 to 2 hours privately. We'd rotate offices. I didn't make them come to my office. We took turns, went to each other's offices, talked about the challenges we faced. I'm pleased that we lowered taxes 19 times. We created what we believed was a very business-friendly environment. We drove our schools to be, and this is longer than my tenure, includes the Republican governors before me, but drove our schools to be #1 in the nation. And that's based on the NAEP exam. Some of you are familiar with that, so it's not just, you know, me bragging about the experience of Republicans there. But we also put personal responsibility back into our health insurance. What's the difference between running a business and running a government? Well, by the way, you'd be surprised at how much is similar in business and in the public sector. I happen to believe one of the things I've just learned over my lifetime is the impact of one person. How one person in a leadership position and their character and values and the way they treat other people can dramatically affect the entire culture of an organization. Over my lifetime, I've come to know the Marriott family very well. My mom and dad and Bill and Allie Marriott Sr. were very close friends in Washington, D.C. some time ago. And Bill had a love of people and a concern about his customers, and particularly concerned about his associates. And his son carries on that same tradition. And interestingly, of the 170,000 people who work there, there is genuinely a different rapport between them and the leadership of the company and with their customers. It's amazing the impact of one person. And that's true in government, that's true in enterprise. I'd also note that just like businesses, states compete. Sometimes we forget, we compete as a nation with other nations for jobs, for technology, for innovation. But states also compete. I learned that. I was not governor very long when a fellow Republican governor came to my state and put billboards up around the state telling people to leave Massachusetts with their jobs. This was Arnold Schwarzenegger, my Republican friend. And he had billboards of him in a t-shirt going like this with his big muscles and said, you know, come to California. So I put billboards up in his state. And I was in a t-shirt going like that. And it said, smaller muscles but much lower taxes, come to Massachusetts. So we compete. What was it like running for president? I like to quote Fritz Mondale when I think about my campaign or campaigns. You may recall Fritz Mondale, Senator Mondale was the poor fellow who had to run against Ronald Reagan. And after it was over, Senator Mondale said this. He said, all my life, I wanted to run for president in the worst way, and that's just what I did. So let me tell you this, the best part of it, and you know this, the best part of running for president was getting to know people across the country. I come away more optimistic about America because I met the people that don't make the news. If you make the news, you've by and large done something bad. These are the people who do something good day in and day out. I mean, I saw parents that were inspiring. I remember I was in one state and a mom there said that after raising her kids, she'd gone back to work and instead of retiring as she'd expected, because she wanted to make sure that her daughter's education loans were as low as possible, and she was helping provide funding for her daughter who was in college. I got the chance to go to Afghanistan and Iraq and meet with our troops there, and was inspired by their sacrifice and dedication. One young man introduced me to his father, the two of them serving in Afghanistan at the same time. I met patriots, had the occasion to be in the home of Senator McCain and his wife Cindy, and also I got to know the former President George Herbert Walker Bush. You know, it's amazing. You think you know people, but you sometimes don't know the real history of their background. I went to the George Bush Library and saw the video. Are you familiar with this? After his plane was shot down, his plane was shot. He could have turned around to get back to the aircraft carrier, but instead of doing so, which would have been the safest thing to do, he decided he would proceed with his mission and drop his armament and then try and make it back. So he dropped his armament, turned around, couldn't make it back, ditched the plane, and was in the water. Fortunately, a submarine, a U.S. submarine, was in the area, spotted him, went to him, and they've got a video. Someone got on the top of the submarine as it surfaced, and have a video of George Herbert Walker Bush climbing up and coming into that ship. A hero. Our sons and daughters who serve in the military are some of America's best. How we love them. I have to tell you, I also met entrepreneurs, big and small. I met a guy named Jim Leotode from Southern Illinois. Jim graduated second in his high school class, second from the bottom. And his dad encouraged him to enlist in the Army. And he convinced his dad to loan him $25,000. His dad said, I'll loan you $25,000 for starting a business, but if you can't make a profit by the end of 1 year, then you'll go into the military. And Jim agreed. And Jim went out he was going to make hot dogs, like J-Dogs, but he found that the equipment was too expensive. He couldn't buy it for $25,000. All he could buy were some stainless steel tables and a refrigerator, so he got in the sandwich business and started making sandwiches and delivering them. Today, Jimmy John's has 2,630 stores. American entrepreneurs can do. These are the things that made me not just fall in love with America again, but also have more confidence in our future. Let's see, Linda Nielsen here asks me this: where are you on President Trump? Well, let's look at his first year. I'm with the president's domestic policy agenda of low taxes and low regulation and smaller government, pushing back against the bureaucrats. By and large, by the way, his policies are very similar to those I campaigned for. I wanted to bring the corporate rate down to 25, and he got it down to 21. So on policies, we're pretty much in the same place. By the way, I'm probably more of a deficit hawk than a lot of Republicans. I was happy to hear from Senator Lee. I'm glad he's also a deficit hawk. I hope to be your junior senator and call you Senior Senator Lee, and we'll work together on that, Senator. Now, I'm not always with the president on what he might say or do, and if that happens, I'll call him like I see him, the way I have in the past. But we can certainly work together, and our agenda will be for the best interest of the people of Utah and the people of our country. Now, how about this one? You ran for president. Do you really want to be a junior senator? Well, yes. I want to fight for the people of Utah, and I believe I can do more for the people of Utah, and I'm going to give all my energy and passion to help this great state and help our great nation, because just as the governor said a moment ago, the values and the lessons and the policies adopted in Utah would be awfully helpful if they could be adopted in Washington. Utah balances its budget every year, keeps its debt down. The nation isn't doing that. Utah exports more than it imports. Nation's not doing that. Utah has been battling to make sure that we reduce the pollution in our air, in particular with the inversions, and has been doing a better job in reducing emissions than has the nation as a whole. So yeah, Utah has a lot to teach the nation, and I hope to take some of those lessons and make things better there and for all of us. And even as a junior senator, I think I can have a real impact on fighting for the people of the state. I'd also note this, which is I'm not worried about the junior senator title. At my age, being called junior is a compliment. So, next question. What do you see happening nationally in the 2018 midterm elections? The pundits think that Republicans will lose the House and maybe the Senate. They're wrong. And the reason I say that is because regardless of what polls say right now, which have very little meaning this far out from the midterms, what people are seeing already is bigger paychecks as a result of the tax cut. And what they're going to increasingly see is rising wages and rising salaries as a result of a very robust economy, which has just been given an additional jolt with that stimulus of a tax cut. And regardless how people feel about Republicans or this person or that person, they're going to look at their paycheck and say, you know what, Republicans do a good job for the American people, and you're going to see Republicans elected. We're going to hold the House, and we're going to hold the Senate. Now, I got asked as well, what is this last question, which is what is the biggest, or what are the biggest problems we're facing? And I have some slides to answer that one, but I don't see a clicker here. So, oh, here's a clicker. Thank you. So I'm going to show you some slides to answer that last question because I took a little time to prepare my thoughts in that regard, and I'm going to divide my answer on our biggest challenges between those that are more specific to Utah as a state, and then those that are not just Utah, but the whole nation. So they all apply to Utah, but some are more specific. And I'll start with, there we go, with the first one, which is with Utah-specific issues. I'm going to pull out my notes here. I can't see. Oh, there it is. There's a screen in front of me. Improving education. Utah citizens say time and time again, we want better schools. And I've had some experience seeing how a state can do that. And even though that's more of a state issue than a senator's issue, I'd like to be able to help on that issue as well. Attracting the best jobs. Utah has an extraordinary record in attracting employers and good jobs, but I want to get better and better jobs so our young people have more and more opportunity. Growing jobs in rural Utah. Do you realize that there are 11 counties in Utah that are undergoing a recession right now, that are shrinking, not growing, whose biggest export is their children? And there are a whole series of things we have to do, including locating federal buildings and state buildings in some of those communities, creating empowerment zones with low taxation and incentives for some of those communities, making sure we have good hospitals and good schools in those communities as well, because people won't live there if they can't get good health care. We want to have city centers, probably around various community colleges, excuse me, state colleges or other institutions of higher learning that can attract enterprises to come and thrive there. Of course, they need to have good broadband, but we also need to deal with issues that relate to agriculture, because they're related in many cases. And our agriculture policies have to recognize that in Utah we need to have immigration policies that work for the short-term visas, the temporary visas that are needed. We have to have more input on federal lands decisions as opposed to having a president like President Clinton or President Obama come in and take our land without any local involvement. Let me go on. Lowering the cost of health insurance. There's no question but that health care reform is a critical issue. Utah is looking for Medicaid waivers. Let's get those Medicaid waivers and find the best way to cover our people and find the best way to lower the cost of insurance. Reducing pollution from inversions. That means making sure that we do whatever is possible at the federal level to keep car companies, their feet to the fire, get cars more efficient, trucks, cars, homes, businesses. This is a real issue for us. Greater voice on federal lands, I mentioned. Immigration policy for Utah Ag. I actually believe that states ought to have a role in saying to the federal government, here's how many temporary visas we need for our agriculture community. And instead of the federal government saying, okay, we're going to give 40,000 to the nation, and then there's this bad scramble to see who gets them. No, let Utah say how many temporary workers we need. For the dairy industry, it might be people on a more long-term basis. For others, it's a very temporary harvest season basis. There's some ag people here who know what that means. Opening new markets for Utah products. Look, I like trade. Utah exports. We're an exporting state. I like to be able to find new places for us to take our goods and services. Securing funding for Utah infrastructure. The people in St. George will tell you that to keep the growth up in Washington County, which is one of the fastest growing counties in the state, I think over 15% per year, they need more water. And we have the rights to additional water. We just need to build the pipeline to get it to places where people live. There's a guy from St. George right there, okay. And then, of course, protecting Utah kids from violence, which I described, as well as from drugs. This is a scourge on our nation. Let me turn to another issue, if I can get this, there we go, and talk about some issues that are federal related, but of course they have an impact on Utah. And I just want to underscore one of the reasons I'm a deficit hawk and concerned about our spending. This shows the United States debt held by the public as a share of the total economy. So you see that during World War II, our debt was about the same size as our total economy, the GDP. It's getting there now. And it's forecast on our current path with our current entitlements for retirees and so forth to completely overwhelm our total economy, well beyond the kind of level that existed when other nations in the world were in crisis. Why is that, you might ask? And the answer, can be learned a bit by looking at how we spend federal dollars. The portion that's in the sort of reddish color there is known as non-discretionary spending, autopilot spending. Congress doesn't set this spending amount, by the way. This is automatic. So if you qualify, for instance, for Social Security, you get it. And so those areas there, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid interest, and other mandatory programs, those are out of the control of Congress. The portion Congress is able to control is in blue. And that's about a third of federal spending. About half of that is defense, and the rest is everything else the government does. And you won't be surprised to see which portion of the budget is the portion that's growing fast. Press the button. Please change. There we go. The squiggly red line across the top shows government revenues. That's tax revenues as a percentage of the economy. And you'll see over a long period of time, it's been around 18 to 20% of the total economy. And then you see Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, and interest as they're projected out into the future by the actuaries. And they obviously consume all of the federal government's revenue, not to mention the rest of government, or defense, and all the other functions that government carries out. That can't happen. That'll overwhelm us. Isn't this great? I press the button, nothing happens. Then I don't press the button, and something does happen. Let me turn to the next. Area. We've got to deal with this. We've got to change our entitlement programs, our mandatory programs, in such a way that they're there for the coming generations, and we can honor the promises we make them. Look, Republicans are the only people on the planet who are willing to talk honestly about the need to rein in this non-discretionary spending and to make sure these programs exist, not just for us, but for our kids. This is the second issue that got raised by people. By the way, these issues are ones that were raised in a conference I had of business and political leaders. Their number one issue was the debt. The number two issue was the warming of the planet. Many of them felt that this is something which the United States alone could deal with. Well, that's wrong. This chart shows the emissions of carbon dioxide over a long period of time for various countries. You'll see the US of A. We've been bringing our emissions down, and Utah, by the way, bringing them down even faster. But look at China. China's growing like crazy, their emissions, and India will be shortly in their heels thereafter, Brazil, Indonesia, and so forth. So if you're going to deal with emissions, well, you have to deal internationally, and we have to get China to take action. And what we can't do is penalize American industry and American entrepreneurs in order to protect China's capacity to grow and take up more and more of our environmental space. The next issue people are concerned about, education. Now, this is so small, you probably can't read it from where you are. Maybe you can. But let me just explain it. The top line is the total cost of teaching a child from kindergarten to their senior year in high school. The cost is in constant dollars, so it's not, it's got inflation taken out of it. In 1970, the cost was $56,900. Today, it's $164,000. So the cost without inflation, the cost has tripled for the cost of teaching a child. The next line, the grayish line, are the number of employees that work in our K through 12 education system per child, and again, that's doubled. Down below are the test scores of our kids, and you'll see that's no improvement at all. The idea that somehow just spending more and hiring more people is going to make schools better is demonstrably wrong. The best way to make schools better is to attract the very best and brightest to become our teachers. Teachers make all the difference in education. It's not classroom size, it's not building, it's not spending, it's getting the best people to become our teachers, and that's got to be a high priority. The next issue that this group raised was poverty. And you remember, some of you in the room, LBJ declared the war on poverty. That was in the 1960s. The number of people that are poor in this country hasn't changed. We know, by the way, how to solve the problem of intergenerational poverty. The Brookings Institute in Washington, a left-leaning organization, did a little study. They said if somebody graduates from high school, if they've ever had a full-time job, and if they don't have a baby until they're married, the probability they'll fall into poverty is 4%. But if they're missing those things, the poverty percentage goes to 93%. And yet, we don't take action to make sure people get married before they have babies, complete high school, and have the experience of at least one full-time job. We know how to fix this problem. Government hasn't taken it on seriously. Let me turn to one more that people were very concerned about, and that is the flattening of wages and salaries in our country. Men, over a long period of time, there's really been, if you take out inflation, no significant improvement at all for men. Women have seen some improvement over the decades, but the last decade it slowed down. And people are very concerned. I'm concerned about that. That's one of the reasons I'm a Republican, by the way. Our Democrat friends think all you have to do is raise the minimum wage. And I'm fine with the minimum wage being tied to inflation. I proposed that when I was a governor. But that's not going to create real growth in real earnings, taking out inflation. If you want, there's only one way to get wages up in real terms for people. And that's if there are more jobs and employers competing to hire people. And when they compete to hire them, they find it's hard to get them, so they have to raise what they're offering, and up go wages and salaries. That's why Republicans talk about making our enterprises successful and attracting jobs here. That's why we lowered the corporate tax rate. It wasn't to put more money into the hands of shareholders. It was to make sure that businesses grow and thrive here, because if you do that, you'll get wages and salaries up. We're the only party that knows that. We have an agenda. Our friendly Democrats do not. Now, you might be tempted to think that the flattening of wage growth is because fewer people are in manufacturing in these last decade or two. But you can see from this chart that the people who are working in manufacturing has kept on going down, down, down over a long, long period of time. And this is not just a matter of manufacturing. This is a matter of making sure that we bring as many good jobs to our country as we can. Now, I said at the outset that Utah has things to teach the nation. Let me show you some of the evidence. Here's government spending. Utah's been growing our government spending over the last 17 years at 3.7%. The federal government, 4.9%. Change slide. There we go. Government debt. The debt in Utah has been growing at 3.7%. The federal debt growing at 9%. Long pause. There we go. Reducing our CO2 emissions. Utah's been reducing CO2 emissions at 1.9%. The country as a whole, only 1.4%. Exports. Our exports have been growing at 8.6% a year. We're an export state. The nation's only been growing exports at 3.9% per year. Employment growth rate. What a story this is. Over those 17 years, growing at almost 2% per year, and the number of people employed, whereas the nation, less than half that. Personal income growth. Wages and salaries here growing at 5.4%, for the nation as a whole, only 3.9%. You can turn off the slides now. I just happen to believe that the The environment that we've seen here in Utah with our legislature and our governor is an environment I'd like to see expanded to Washington, D.C., where there's respect between people and parties, where we look for common answers, where we also balance budgets and see wages going up, and fight to improve our schools, make sure that our environment is as clean as we can possibly make it. And I intend to fight for those things if I'm lucky enough to become your senator. Now let me make one more comment before I close, and that is just to talk a bit about where we're headed as a nation. I happen to be very optimistic about the future of the country for a lot of reasons. Let me just mention a couple. One is the demographics of the region, of our nation. Ours is the only developed nation where the baby boomers had a lot of kids. So we have a Generation Y, which is large, and Generation Y is the generation that buys a new house, gets an apartment, buys a car, and powers the economy. The other developed nations, they didn't have a lot of kids as baby boomers, and they have a shrinking population base, which is just killing them. So demographics is one reason we'll do well. Another is we're going into an extraordinary age of innovation. We've been innovating along a linear path, I mean, making incremental improvements year after year. We're about to go to an exponential path, logarithmic path, where the growth is extraordinary. And there's something called Moore's Law. Some of you are tech people. You know Moore's Law says that the processing power you can get for $1 doubles every 18 months to 24 months. And that's been going on for the last 4 or 5 decades. If you applied that to a Volkswagen, by the way, if you bought a Volkswagen in 1970, but the capacity, the improvement in the Volkswagen followed Moore's Law, it would be able to go 300,000 miles an hour, get 2 million miles per gallon, and it would cost 4 cents. Now, that's exponential growth, and it's being applied now in sensors, in memory, in communications, in processing. It's going to change healthcare. It's going to change our businesses. One business leader said, software eats everything. Every business in America, almost, is going to be dramatically affected by this new era. And in an era of innovation, America succeeds. And in an era of innovation, Utah succeeds. We're an innovative people, in an innovative state. So I'm optimistic about the future. And I'm also optimistic about the role America is going to play here and around the world. During the last campaign, the president famously said he's going to make America great again. Our Democrat friends said, no, it's already great. I'm not going to resolve that debate, but I'm going to tell you this. I think there are at least 2 aspects to the principle of greatness that are important to think about. One is strength. I mean, to be a great nation, I think you've got to be a strong nation. That means a strong economy, a strong military. I think it's very hard for a very small nation somewhere that's a weak economy without a strong military to be considered a great nation. Maybe a wonderful place that you love to visit and wonderful people, but it's not going to be a great nation. China could be a great nation. Russia could be a great nation with regards to their strength. But there's another dimension to greatness, in my view, and that is goodness. When you say something is great, I think it's not just strong, it is also good. I had the occasion to meet with Shimon Peres some years ago. He was at the time president of Israel. And I asked him about America's involvement in Iraq. And he said, before I answer that, I need to put it in context. He said, America is the greatest nation on earth, the greatest nation that has ever been. He said, whenever there's war on the planet, the nation that wins takes land from the nation that loses, because land is the source of value on our planet. And he said, one nation in history has laid down the lives of hundreds of thousands of its sons and daughters and taken no land. The only land America has ever taken is enough land to bury our dead. America is a great nation because it is strong and it is good. Russia may be strong. Russia under Putin is not good and will not have the capacity of being a great nation. We are a good nation, a great nation. Utah is a good and strong and great state. I hope to be able to honor this state by being a member of the Senate and represent you there and fight for the values that have made this state all that it is. Thank you so much. Good to be with you this evening. Thank you.
We'd like to thank former Governor Mitt Romney for being with us tonight. The band will continue to play for about 15 minutes.
And Mitt Romney, their former Massachusetts governor and former Republican presidential candidate, speaking at this fundraiser for the Utah County Republican Party. He's running for the seat currently held by Orrin Hatch, who's retiring. Senator Hatch was not in attendance at tonight's dinner. He tweeted, "Some of the best meetings happen over late-night hamburgers and frost tops," with the hashtag HatchBurgerTour.